Hi everybody, it's Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, and at this time every week I have my regular weekly feature which I call Hotspot of the Week. And this week I'm going to be talking a lot about the Canberra property market, but rather oddly I'm going to do it by talking about a location that's not actually in the ACT, it's in New South Wales. And I'm referring to the location of Queanbeyan, which is technically in the state of New South Wales, but in terms of the reality of the economy in which it sits and the property market in which it sits, it's part of the Canberra metropolitan area. It just happens to be separated by a little line on a map which says it's not actually in the ACT, but very much part of the Canberra market, and has a particular role to play in it, and it's one of the reasons why it's thriving. Now, I just want to talk about this market by going through our location report for that location. A, to explain why we rate this particular location highly, and B, to illustrate the sorts of things that we look for, because the way we construct our location reports, and I'm referring to the reports that are on the Hotspotting website on the location reports page, where many of the locations around Australia that we think are worth noting, we have reports, location reports on them that you, the real estate consumers, can buy if you want to be informed about those particular locations. And they're constructed in a particular way which shows how we rate areas and the sorts of things that we look for in deciding areas that we think might be future hotspots. So we start with a general introduction, and we make the point that it's the proximity of Queanbeyan to the nation's capital, Canberra, that's really key, and the reasons why we rate this area and why it's emerging as a strong property market. We note in the introduction on page 1 that it's got strong population growth, that its unemployment rate is low, that there's lots of new housing under construction. There's a big factor that much of the, a certain percentage of the development that's providing for the future population of the Canberra area is happening across the border in Queanbeyan area, and that it's relative affordability compared to mainstream Canberra. That's part of the attraction, part of the reason why there's a lot of new building going on there, and why it has a very active property market, because relative to many of the suburbs of Canberra, the suburbs of this area are cheaper and more affordable. Particularly the unit prices, in fact, much lower than what you'd be paying for units in Canberra and the ACT itself. We note that sales activity has been high and elevated, and that's become one of the standout regions for growth. We've just recently done the research for the New South Wales regional section of the upcoming edition of the Price Predictor Index, when we look at sales activity for every town and city in Australia, and the towns and suburbs of this particular region. There are many with elevated activity, and we think that because Canberra is such a solid market, it's a growing market, and it's forecast to be one of the nation's leaders on price growth in the next, say, 1 to 2 years, by some forecasters anyway. We feel that Queanbeyan, because of its links to Canberra, is going to benefit from that. And lastly, we make the point in the introduction that it has above average rental yields for both houses and units, higher than you have in Canberra, and certainly a lot higher than you have in Sydney, 3 hours down the road. So the first section of the report is we talk about the economy and amenities, because we believe that the underlying economy is one of the key factors in whether a property market is going to be strong or not. And we believe that at a major state level, a city level, and right down to a local government area. And that's certainly the case for this local government area, which is actually after a recent amalgamation, is called Queanbeyan Palerang, and has a population of 56,000, and that's projected to increase to 76,000 over the next, say, 12 years. So it's very much a growth area, and it's growing very steadily. After the recent amalgamation to create the bigger local government area, there's quite a strong agricultural sector in this local government area, and there's also a very strong construction industry, because there's a lot of new development happening there as part of Canberra's ongoing growth. Because another factor that shows the links to Canberra is that 28% of the Queanbeyan population actually works in government departments in the Canberra area. So other factors under the general heading of the local economy, there's plenty of good amenities. There's the Queanbeyan District Hospital. It's got lots of schools, both public and private. The TAFE campus, one of the bits of the local economy just outside central Queanbeyan is I'm just struggling, the Royola solar farm, which is allegedly Australia's largest solar farm. And there's also a couple of major light manufacturing precincts, and it's got major transport infrastructure, and several major road transport companies are based in the city. So then we move on to look at the property profile of the region, and one of the things we notice that, like Canberra generally, vacancy rates tend to be very low in this area, although some of the newer development areas, sometimes the vacancies creep above 3% as new product comes online. Temporarily, I think, it's kind of mortgage belt country. Over 40% of households have mortgages, which is higher than average. So that tells you something about the area. It's a new growth area, perhaps younger families setting up there because there's land available for new development, and because it's outside the ACD, we don't have this ridiculous tight controls on land supply that they have in the ACT. It's a little bit freer in New South Wales. Another factor, in fact, is that because it's in New South Wales, there's been some recent relaxation of stamp duty, assistance for first home buyers, concessions, etc., and grants. You can access them across the border in Queanbeyan because it's in New South Wales, things that aren't available in the ACT. So these are all factors in the local property market. Relative affordability, the availability of assistance for first home buyers, more so than in the ACT, and low vacancy rates, as I said. Just to give you a comparison in terms of pricing, there are a number of suburbs in this precinct, the Queanbeyan Pallarang local government area, where median house prices are in the 400,000s. Very hard to find suburbs that low within the city of Canberra, within the ACT, and others are in the sort of low 500,000s. Most of the suburbs are sort of in the 400,000 or 500,000s in terms of median prices, whereas in Canberra, it's a very expensive market, and lots of suburbs are 600,000, 700,000, and up above $1 million. There's been some good growth in this market. Some of the suburbs in this local government area have had double-digit growth, including the suburb of Queanbeyan itself, which has grown its median price 10% in the last 12 months, and there's a couple of other locations in similar. Then we look at the median rental yields. We've got suburbs with median rental yields 4.6%, 4.8%, 5.1%. So they're well above average compared particularly to the biggest cities, Sydney and Melbourne, and also compared to Canberra. So that's another attraction for property investors to consider this location. And then there's quite a strong apartment market in some of the central suburbs like Queanbeyan itself and Queanbeyan East, where the median unit prices are 290, 300,000, and median rental yields are 5.5%, 5.6%, 5.8%. So higher, as is often the case, than the housing yields, but certainly a lot higher than in Canberra, and again compared to Sydney, 3 hours down the road. Then in our typical location report, having looked at the local economy, the population and demographic factors, and having a look at a snapshot of the local property market and all the statistics and analysing them, then move on to one of the very, very key things, it's the future prospects. We're not so much interested in a location about what's happening there now in the recent past. We want to know what's going to happen in the future, because a market that's currently doing not much can actually be a very, very good prospect for buyers if there's reason to believe that in the near future it's going to prosper because of things that are coming up. So one of the things that is coming up in the future of this Queanbeyan area is strong population growth. It's already growing strongly, and it's projected to continue to do so, and its proximity to Canberra is obviously a factor in that, and Canberra is a growing city with a very strong economy, low unemployment, relatively high wages. I mentioned the New South Wales stamp duty concession, which are an advantage for people who slip over the border to this location outside the ACT. There's a number of significant businesses locally that provide employment, There's a major town centre and shopping precinct at Gugong, getting underway, $150 million project, and quite a number of other things. When we look, we have at the end of these location reports, we list the major projects, both property developments and infrastructure projects that are underway or in planning, and there's quite a number of small to medium-sized ones and some very big ones as well. The Jupiter Wind Farm, $300 million project is coming up. There's road extensions, new council offices, $60 million project. Various other things, expansion of existing high schools and creation of new ones because it's a growth area with new housing estates evolving. But the really big projects are residential ones. There's some major master planned subdivision developments. There's one at Gugong, which is listed as a $2.5 billion project over time. It's under construction. It's going to evolve over 20 years, including a major town centre for the Gugong area. There's another one, West Queanbeyan, $900 million project. And then we've got a third one that's $600 million. So there's lots of construction activity coming up in the future of this area, and that's going to be creating economic activity and jobs. And those things tend to be very beneficial to the growth of property markets. So that's how we construct our reports to make a case for why we think these areas are worth considering. And that's our snapshot of the Queanbeyan Palerang region, just outside, across the border from the ACT, but very much part of the Canberra metropolitan area in terms of the economy and in terms of the property market, and benefiting from its growth factors, its relative affordability, its relatively high rental yields, and the fact that there's accessibility to New South Wales state government assistance for first home buyers. So a market to consider. Canberra is a strong market, low vacancies, high rental growth, solid price growth, predicted by some to lead capital cities in the next 1 to 2 years on price growth. And benefiting from all that and all the other factors I've just mentioned is the area of Queanbeyan. So maybe worth considering as an affordable alternative to downtown Canberra. If you'd like to know more about this location or any other location that you're interested in across Australia, I would urge you to go to the hotspotting.com.au website and check out our location reports page, where we don't have reports in every location in Australia because not every location is worth talking about. We tend to feature the areas that we rate, the ones that we think are going to show good growth. One or two others that we don't rate, but there's lots of questions about them, like Gladstone in Queensland and the coal mining town of Moranbah, and Darwin, which right now is a weak market, going back for a few years, but we get a lot of questions about it because it's been a growth market in the past and may no doubt will be again in the future. So that's the location reports page on hotspotting.com.au. Great reports, jam-packed with good information and commentary and analysis. Recommend it to you. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au signing off. I will talk to you again soon.